Hey friend, you aren't leaving your firm just to work nonstop and make less money.
You wanted freedom, fulfillment, and a practice that actually supports your life.
Welcome to Off the Clock, the podcast for lawyers and law firm owners who are ready to break up with the billable hour
and build a profitable, joyful, client-loving practice that loves you back.
We're Gwen Griggs
and Whitney Harper,
lawyers, law firm founders, and co-creators of Advos Pro.
Each episode, we share stories, strategies, and bold steps to help you stop surviving and start thriving on your own terms.
So let's get you off the clock and into a practice you're meant to build.
Welcome to episode 5 of Off the Clock. And today we're talking about a topic that is near and dear to our hearts, right? It's around pricing and pitching and working in a deliverables-based way.
I love this conversation. I'm so excited for it.
Yes. We're big believers in build a practice you love. And I think the fact that we have slayed the billable hour dragon, right? And then it just ripples into every other obstacle or idea that you think it has to be done this way because that's the way it's always been done. If we can do it here, we can do it everywhere else too. So, but this is the tip of the spear.
Absolutely.
So Whitney, let's start with you framing up for our listeners what does it mean to be a deliverables-based pricing attorney?
So I'll start with what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean billing by the hour or the billable hour by another name. You know, it's not giving the client a sort of not to exceed price, but then billing by the hour up until you get to that price. It's not a package of billable hours at a discount because you paid for them up front. And it's also not flat fee. And that's when most people hear us talk about deliverables-based pricing or we broke up with a billable hour, they immediately go to flat fee.
So true.
And that's not it. What we learned, and I'll throw this caveat here just because it's worth saying, deliverables-based pricing is not something that we came up with like in the moment and it was perfect and we, have been riding that wave ever since. It took some trial and error. And so what we're talking about today is at least 10 years of our learning, all the ways it didn't work until we got to the way that it does work. And so when I say it's not flat fee, that doesn't mean we didn't try flat fee.
Right.
We absolutely did try to scope projects on a flat fee. And man, was that exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember we would make these proposals for clients that were like 8 PowerPoint slides long? And
I do remember. Yes.
We're lawyers. So of course we lawyered our proposals. We're trying to find every nook and cranny of defining the scope and being very, very clear. And bless them, lawyers are forever asking us, how do you make sure that you've defined the scope perfectly? And that there's nothing missing and there's no way for the client to wiggle through or for the project scope to creep. And you don't. The answer is you don't. And deliverables-based pricing is really born out of that experience of flat fee being problematic for a lot of reasons, right? It's exhausting to try to scope it. And then the minute you've scoped it and you start to get to work, something about the project changes. Right. The client makes a different decision than you thought they were going to, or there's facts that no one understood to begin with, or the counterparty decides to behave differently than you expected them to. Whatever. The economy changes.
Deals change.
Right.
Yes. Exactly. COVID hits, right?
Oh my gosh.
There's just a million different things that change the deal, change the parties, right?
And it's true whether it's deal doing, right? Corporate work or a family law case or I think in every practice area, to a man, when we talk to people about flat fees and their experience with it, that's the story. I put the flat fee out there, something changed, then I had to rescope. The client was annoyed that I rescoped. I was exhausted by rescoping. I was annoyed by having to do it too. And so eventually at the next change, I gave up on the rescoping and I just ate the difference.
Wait,
And
or went
so,
back to hourly billing, right?
yes, or went back to hourly.
Right.
Um, or people say, okay, well, this is outside of scope. And so I've got your flat fee for this piece, but the rest is going to be hourly. And if you're going to do that, you might as well just be hourly.
Right.
Um,
Right. And it's one of those things I think about, like lawyers, we talk about foreseeability, right? When we were in law school,
yeah.
like it is foreseeable that we're all going to learn something that we didn't know, right? As the deal progresses, right? We're
Yes.
an obstacle is going to come, and whether it's a deal or anything, right? Like we're
Mhm.
humans, and our clients are humans.
Yeah.
And they change and they learn and they have different experiences, or they hear a story of something that didn't work, and now they need to make sure we cover off on that too. Like it
Yeah.
is dynamic. The relationship is dynamic. So planning as if it's not dynamic, right, is just breaks your brain, right? Like
Yeah.
we know it will evolve. So plan for that.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's not foreseeable. It's actual fact. The thing
Right.
is going to change. Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think that was the turning point for us, was this moment of frustration of this flat fee isn't working. And we know we're not going to bill by the hour. There has
Right.
to be a better way. And so we, with the help of some great ideas and counsel from some business-minded friends, landed on this deliverables approach where it really is durable, it's dynamic, it allows for those changes, but it also lets us give the client a good sense on the front end of what the project's going to entail and what are the components in that project and how do they size up, so that the client actually has some agency, they have some control, they can make some choices, they can understand how their choices or the counterparty's choices or a judge's ruling or a change in the facts on the ground might affect their ultimate fee or the path their project is going to take. And you're giving them some framework for it, but you're not locking in. You're not saying this thing is going to be this amount. You're giving them a framework with some understanding around why it will adjust as things change, and what kind of adjustments there might be. So really what the deliverables-based method is this breaking down of a project or a matter into its component parts and then sizing them into points. And the points are really just kind of a stand-in for a comparative sizing. So, one thing might be 1 point, and the thing that's twice as complex or twice as meaty might be 2 points. And you can kind of line up the components of a project and the components of all types of work you do and size them that way and really get to a place where you've effectively created this paradigm of like tokens in an arcade. Right? Kid walks into an arcade, buys some tokens, and goes, oh, well, this game, skee ball, takes 1 token, and this one, laser tag, is 4 tokens. I get that. This is more complex. There's bells and whistles. This thing's pretty simple, pretty quick. Same story. And clients, it's funny because I think lawyers have this perception that like clients won't accept that. They need something more concrete. And I love, Gwen, your example of like, how objective is hours?
Right. Right. Yes. I can rant a little bit about the, like we are not machines that deliver output at a rate where every single hour is the same hour, right? That's just, it's not a truth, right? Like there are hours where we're energized and focused and in flow and we can get a whole bunch of stuff done. And then there are times when we're tired or have competing things or family issues in the back of our mind, and it's hard to focus. And so the idea that, we can spit out 40 of the exact same size and price hour, I think is one of the biggest lies that our profession tells each other, tells us. So this is a step in the direction of like quantifying what the client actually cares about, because what the client cares about is the thing, right? Whether it was a deposition or a contract or like that is what they're asking for. They're not asking for hours. And they honestly generally don't care how much time it took. They care, did you deliver something great? And did you deliver it on time? Like, when you deliver it matters to them. And can I predict the pricing of it? I think it's also worth mentioning that, like, we didn't come up with this framework just wholesale, like with a blank piece of paper in front of us. Like, we studied what other industries do. And when you have a complex project with a lot of different variables, how could it be priced? And we're not the first industry that's faced this. So, like, why would we stick with a model that, like, makes your client not want to call you, right? If you were design a business model, you wouldn't say, I'm going to build a model that says my client is going to have an unknown number of cost associated with the time that they call. And you're creating a barrier to them calling when there's probably a whole lot more work that they need, but they're afraid to ask for.
Yeah. That's actually one of my favorite, like, sort of secret benefits of moving to deliverables-based pricing is when you can be really upfront about the fact that we don't bill by the hour. There is never a clock ticking. And we're going to spend the time on the front end of an engagement to get a sense of what's going on, help you understand how we will solve for it, and what the fee is likely to be, and kind of what composes that fee. And then you can make decisions about it. If you let a client know that that's how it's going to go, they feel free to call you, and they will call you about things that sometimes are a legal problem, sometimes not. And you then get to be the one to say, hey, this thing, I don't think you actually need me, and build a ton of trust by giving them a sense of a different way to solve it or a more cost-effective way to solve it. And then at the same time, they're calling you and telling you about more work that you get to do. They are marketing to you instead of you marketing to them in a way. Like, it's amazing.
Right.
It's this sort of virtuous cycle. I think that people are afraid of not getting to bill for all of their time, when really what is happening is you're making that time more valuable. You're building client relationships that are high trust, where clients want to talk to you and want to send their friends to you, and really become the revenue generating machine for you, which is incredible.
Yeah, tremendous.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question with regard to brand new client. I think this is one of the big hurdles. Brand new client or potential client, I should say. Potential client calls Whitney and gets on the phones, tells the problem. What do you need, or how do you start the conversation to explain to them what the scope is, or what your recommendation is for how they engage?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that is a little bit of the black box that people who want to make this switch, that's kind of where they tend to get mentally stuck, right?
Yeah.
I start that conversation, frankly, first by saying upfront, we don't bill by the hour. And I want to have a really good conversation with you today to understand the lay of the land, what's going on, what you see as the problem or the project. But also, I'm using that conversation to get a sense of the client themselves. Right? Is this somebody who I'm going to work well with, who I can be efficient in my work with? Is it somebody who's going to need more hand-holding? What's their risk tolerance? Are they likely to want the more buttoned-up solution, or the more sort of cost-effective but maybe a little more risk-involved approach? If there are
and I'm going to interject just here because I want that is such a great point that I think our profession doesn't spend enough time thinking about.
Oh gosh, no.
So sometimes people have come to us and said, my last lawyer did it wrong. And when we look at it, it's not that they did it wrong. Like, it's technically not wrong.
Yeah.
It is wrong for that client, because that client is a CEO and it needs to be a paragraph or less, right? And they got the 20-page version of it. And so, right, like your point, and I'm sorry to interject there, but your point
it's great.
of, like, understanding who the client is and how you're going to be able to serve them. Like, it really gets to your point of, like, trust building, right?
Yes.
How do we just, you're going to have more profitable, more joyful, right? It's going to be easier if you build trust. And that is, it's like step one in trust building is actually understanding who your client is.
Yeah. And kind of tying to our last episode, we talked about being a generalist versus being the go-to. And I think that's actually part of this conversation too, is the trust building in that conversation with the client happens because you are the go-to in that area. You know that area of the law or that sort of sector of things so well that as the client is telling you what's going on, you can in your head start kind of thinking through what are the things that we're going to need to address here because you know it.
Mhm.
And that makes this whole process so much easier. That domain expertise, really understanding your body of work well, means you can scope things pretty accurately and still leave yourself room, right? So I'm having this conversation as a potential client, getting a sense of their project, and afterward I can send them a note and say, hey, I think your project is probably going to be, we size things into points. And so I think you're probably going to be 5 to 7 points. And here are the components that I see. And there may be other things that come up that adjust the scope here, but I want to give you a sense of what it's likely to be and why. And here's how we'll, invoice you for it and kind of what the timing looks like and how long we expect this initial phase or these first few steps to take. So the client gets a sense of things. And you're building trust, right? They really, when you can give them that roadmap in an area where, frankly, they're probably a little terrified and out of their depth. And even if it's not something big and scary, the law is big and scary. And lawyers, as I've recently been informed, lawyers can be a little scary. So,
well, and billing by the hour means I am opening up my checkbook and I don't even know what I'm filling. I'm giving you a blank check. I don't know. So there's so much fear around the uncertainty for a client who doesn't know what it should cost, what it could cost, and that creates a tremendous amount of fear, right? So which means they often don't call when they could call or should call.
Yeah.
I also think, circling back to your point of building trust at that early stage, scoping the project because you know it, because you understand it. One of the really powerful things is saying no, right? The client comes to you and says, I need blank, because they've talked to all their friends and they need to get ready to sell, or they need to take on an investment. And when you are really, really comfortable and you're in your zone of expertise, right, you're bringing in more than just the answer to the question. I can go off and do the thing you told me to do.
Yep.
Like a vending machine. Or we can ask the deeper question that is the more important question of why, right? Yep. And what does that actually mean? And is what you think you're going to do really the most important thing to do? And that back to the building trust, the power of the power and the impact of building trust.
My concrete memory about that point is there was a period of time in our firm, I don't know why, where we just kept saying trademarks are the gateway drug, because people were coming to us and saying, I've got a trademark X. And we would have this kind of intake call with them and realize that, sure, a trademark is probably a thing you want, but first we should figure out who owns your company or some other like really fundamental issue. And we could say to the client, if you've got X dollars that you're ready to spend on legal, if I'm in your shoes, that's not where I would spend them. I would spend them on this other project because I don't want to create value in a company that I'm then going to have to argue with someone over who owns it. Right. I want to get that part clear.
Right.
And clients were so grateful for that. Just that guidance of, oh, okay. And thanks for giving me the space to tell you the things you needed to know to be able to give me that kind of redirection or that kind of information that I didn't even realize was going to be important. So that's That is a huge one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it builds, that lifetime value of a client, right? Like
Yeah.
looking at it not just as a project that I have to go get new projects every few months and I've got to constantly be marketing, right? If you build that, I'm the go-to,
Yep.
and you're continually adding value and you're demonstrating the value that you're adding, right? That client becomes, right, a consistent client for life. I used to say until they sell, but what we're finding is some of our clients sell and then come back because
Yeah.
the experience is just so different than what they've had in other places. And I know we're coming up on the end of our time together talking about this topic, which we could talk about for days. But Whitney, let me ask you, if you were talking to a law firm owner and they were curious about deliverables-based pricing and wanted to do one thing, because we're big believers in one thing, what is the one thing they should do in this next quarter to get them a step closer to that kind of pricing? What would you say?
I would say one really simple thing would be to pick a particular type of project, just something that you do often that isn't big and unwieldy, that has maybe a little bit of fluctuation in how, what the components might be or how complex they could be, and try out pricing it on a deliverables basis. Even if it just means that you give the client a range and a sense of, maybe you don't break things down into points, but just here are the components. And I think based on these components, your range is $5,000 to $10,000 or whatever it is. And let the client know that it's based on the deliverables, not the time and the value of those deliverables, the complexity, and give it a go. Have that conversation with the client. Be really clear that you're not going to bill by the hour and learn from it. Like, be okay with getting it a little wrong and
that's
rest.
a tough one.
Yeah, that's
You're asking a
hard.
lot.
That's hard for the lawyers. But be okay with getting it a little wrong because you're learning from it. This is like the opportunity to gather some data, get some experience, get some turns at the wheel, find out what works for you and how you talk about it with a client, and really just feel what it feels like to be freed up from tracking the 6-minute increments and instead focused on delivering value to the client and profit to yourself. Because those two things are a winning combination.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. So that would be my one thing for the quarter.
I love it. I love it. This has been a fantastic conversation. Obviously, we could go on for hours and hours on this one, and we'll in subsequent podcasts pull this apart and keep talking about it. But thank you everyone for your time today, and hope you received value. That you can tell that's a thread that we care very, very deeply about. And until next time,
we'll see you soon. Thanks for joining us on Off the Clock. If you're ready to design a law practice that's profitable, joyful, and built around your life, not just your clients,
come check out The Path to Promance and take the Promance scorecard at advospro.com.
And if this episode spoke to you, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another lawyer who needs to hear it.
You deserve a practice that loves you back. Let's build it together.